Right now, if you are sitting in a coffee shop or maybe riding on a train or even just standing in your kitchen with a window open to the street, take a second to really notice the background noise. People are talking. It is the most ordinary, mundane sound in the world. But if you stop and strip away your familiarity with it, what is actually happening in that room is completely absurd. Right now, a primate sitting across from you is pushing air out of a pair of meat sacks inside their chest. That air travels up a wet tube, forces a pair of tiny mucous membranes to vibrate at hundreds of times per second, and then a muscular tentacle in their mouth called a tongue thrashes around, shaping those vibrations into invisible waves of pressure. Those waves ripple through the air, crash into a piece of stretched skin inside your ear, translate into electrical spikes, and suddenly, inside your brain, a highly specific image appears. They say a word, and you instantly see a yellow car. They make a different sequence of noises, and you suddenly feel a deep, crushing wave of sadness. It is, by every definition, telepathy. But here is the question nobody actually asks. How on earth did this start? And this is where it gets interesting. I am not talking about the invention of alphabets or writing. We know roughly when that happened. Cuneiform, hieroglyphs, scratches on clay tablets, that is recent history. I am talking about the absolute 0 point, the moment before words existed. Picture this. You are standing in a vast, dry savanna. It is 3 million years before now. You look around at your family, your tribe, and nobody can say a single word. There are grunts, there are screams, there is the slamming of fists on the ground, but there are no names, there are no stories. There is no, "I will meet you by the river tomorrow." There is only the immediate, brutal present. How did we cross that gap? When did a random animalistic noise transform into a symbol? Not as in, when did we learn to make sounds? Obviously, animals make sounds. Frogs croak, dogs bark, lions roar. We are not talking about biology's basic alarm clocks. We are talking about the spark of meaning. The moment a sound stopped being just a biological reflex and became a vehicle for a thought. What if we are wrong about how it happened? What if it was not some slow, majestic dawn of intelligence where a wise ancestor pointed to a star and gave it a name? What if the origin of your voice, the very reason you can talk to your friends on a Friday night, is rooted in something entirely different? Buckle up. This is the rabbit hole we are going down today. And the evidence for it genuinely melts your brain, because it forces you to look at your own body, your own mind, and your own history in a way that feels almost uncomfortable. Let's start at the very beginning. What does it actually take to speak? Let's start with the most obvious thing. You probably think that the reason an ape cannot talk is simply that it is not smart enough. You think it is a software problem. If you just upgraded a chimpanzee's brain, it would start chatting with you about the weather. But here is the thing. That is historically, scientifically false. And we know this because of an experiment that is both fascinating and deeply heartbreaking. Back in 1947, a pair of psychologists named Keith and Kathy Hayes decided to run the ultimate test. They adopted an infant chimpanzee named Vicky and raised her entirely as a human child in their own home. I am not making this up. People genuinely did this in the name of science. Vicky wore dresses, she slept in a crib, she sat at the dining table and ate with a spoon. And the Hayes family dedicated years of their lives to teaching her one specific skill. They wanted to teach her to speak English. They spent hours every single day manipulating her lips, trying to get her to mimic sounds, rewarding her, coaxing her. Vicky was brilliant. She learned to solve puzzles, she understood complex commands, she clearly had a rich internal world. The software was running. But after years of grueling effort, how many words do you think Vicky learned to speak? 4. She could barely, breathlessly whisper the words mama, papa, cup, and up. And even those sounded like she was suffocating while trying to force the air out. Why? Because the honest answer is, it was never a software problem. It was a hardware problem. To understand why you can speak and a chimpanzee cannot, you have to look at your own throat. Inside your neck, you have a structure called the larynx, or the voice box. In almost every other mammal on Earth, the larynx sits high up in the throat. This is a brilliant piece of engineering. Because the larynx is high, the airway and the food pathway are completely separated. A dog, a cat, or a chimpanzee can breathe and swallow at the exact same time without any risk. But in humans? Sometime around 300,000 years ago, our anatomy did something incredibly strange. Our larynx dropped. It migrated completely down the throat. And you're about to say, okay, so what? Here is what. Because your larynx is low, your airway and your food tube now cross over each other. They share the same space, which means that every single time you eat a piece of bread or swallow a sip of water, it has to pass directly over the opening to your lungs. You have a tiny flap called the epiglottis that has to perfectly time its closure every single time you swallow, or else you die. I want you to sit with that for a second. We are the only mammals that regularly choke to death on our own food. Thousands of people die this way every year. From a purely evolutionary standpoint, this is a catastrophic design flaw. You would not build a car where the exhaust pipe and the fuel line share the same valve. It is a death trap. So why did evolution allow it? Why did nature give us a throat that actively tries to kill us? Because of what that dropped larynx left behind. It left a massive, hollow chamber above the vocal cords. And inside that chamber, your tongue finally had the room to move around. It had the space to shape, curve, and bounce the sound waves coming up from the vocal cords. That empty space in your throat is the acoustic guitar body that makes vowels and consonants possible. Evolution looked at the very real risk of choking to death on a piece of fruit, and it decided, the ability to make complex sounds is so unbelievably valuable for this ape's survival that we are willing to accept mass casualties to get it. Yes, exactly that. Every time you drink water, you are playing Russian roulette with your own anatomy, just so you have the ability to say hello. So here is where the story takes a sharp turn. If our ancestors didn't have the throat hardware for hundreds of thousands of years, how did language even start? How did we bridge the gap between animal grunts and complex grammar? Let me throw you something even wilder. We didn't start with our mouths at all. We started with our hands. Look at your hand right now. Seriously, look at your index finger. It seems like the most ordinary thing in the world. But extending your index finger to point at something across the room is a cognitive superpower that breaks the laws of biology. Back in the 1990s, a neuroscientist named Giacomo Rizzolatti at the University of Parma in Italy made a discovery that changed everything. They had electrodes hooked up to the brains of macaque monkeys. One day, a researcher picked up a peanut. The monkey just watched him. But the brain scanner lit up as if the monkey had picked up the peanut itself. They had discovered mirror neurons, cells in the brain that fire not just when you do something, but when you watch someone else do it. It is the biological foundation of empathy. It is your brain simulating another mind. Now, combine that with pointing. When an ape wants something, it reaches for it. If a chimpanzee wants an apple, it stretches its whole hand out to grab it. But a human child, before they can even speak a single word, will point at an apple. The child does not want to grab it. The child wants you to look at it. Do you realize how complex that is? The child is projecting an invisible line from their fingertip across empty space to an object, and they know that your mind will follow that invisible line and see what they see. It is called shared intentionality, and almost no wild animals do this. If you point at a ball for a wolf, the wolf will just look at your finger. It doesn't understand the invisible line. Interestingly, dogs do understand it, but only because we bred them for tens of thousands of years to read our minds. The evolutionary psychologist Michael Corballis proposed the gesture-first hypothesis. He argued that before our larynx dropped, before we could make the sounds, we were already talking. We were gesturing. We were mimicking the shape of animals with our hands. We were pointing to the river. We were pantomiming a hunt. Language did not start as a sound. It started as a dance of the hands. But gestures have a massive limitation. You cannot gesture in the dark. And you cannot gesture if your hands are full of tools or food. And you cannot gesture if the person you are trying to warn is facing the other way. The evolutionary pressure was building. We needed a way to put those hand gestures into the air. We needed to translate the movement of the fingers into the movement of the tongue. Okay, that's settled. The throat adapted, the hands led the way. Now forget everything I just said about the mechanics, because mechanics do not explain the why. Why did we need to say so many complex things? You'll say, well, obviously, to coordinate hunting. To say, you go left, I will go right, and we will trap the mammoth. Sounds familiar, right? That is the classic textbook answer. Okay, then explain this. Lions hunt in perfectly coordinated packs. They flank their prey, they set ambushes, they communicate with subtle body movements and basic grunts. Wolves do the exact same thing. Orcas coordinate complex attacks on seals. None of them needed to invent grammar. None of them needed syntax. If hunting is all it takes, the animal kingdom should be full of poetry. The honest answer is, we did not invent language to talk about the physical world. We invented language to talk about each other. Let me introduce you to a concept that will make you look at your own social life completely differently. It is called Dunbar's number, named after the British anthropologist Robin Dunbar. If you watch a group of chimpanzees or baboons, they spend a massive amount of their day doing something very specific. They sit together and pick bugs, dirt, and dead skin out of each other's hair. This is called grooming, but it has almost nothing to do with hygiene. Grooming is social glue. It releases huge waves of endorphins. It lowers heart rates. It is how monkeys say, "I like you, we are allies. If a fight breaks out, I have your back." To keep a primate society from collapsing into a bloody civil war, the members have to constantly groom their allies. But Dunbar noticed a mathematical problem. The larger the primate brain, the larger the social group they live in. And the larger the social group, the more time you have to spend grooming to maintain your alliances. Chimpanzees live in groups of about 50, and they spend up to a fifth of their waking hours picking through hair. Now, look at humans. Based on the size of our neocortex, our natural group size is about 150 people. That is Dunbar's number. Even today, without realizing it, you probably only maintain meaningful relationships with about 150 people. But for early humans, living in tribes of 150, the math broke down. To keep that many people bonded using physical grooming, they would have had to spend nearly half their entire day just picking bugs off each other. They would have starved to death. There was no time to hunt, no time to forage. We needed a way to groom multiple people at exactly the same time. We needed a way to bond while keeping our hands free to work. So, what did we do? We invented vocal grooming. We invented gossip. I'm serious. And that, in my view, is one of the most brilliant and hilarious twists in human evolution. Language evolved primarily so we could talk behind each other's backs. It allowed us to sit in a circle, chipping flint into arrowheads, while simultaneously sending waves of sound to 3 different people, signaling our alliance. We could exchange crucial social data. Who is sleeping with whom? Who refused to share meat yesterday? Who is acting aggressively and needs to be kept in check? We did not invent words to describe the stars. We invented words to survive the politics of our own tribes. Gossip is the invisible thread that allowed humanity to scale up without tearing itself apart. And then, about 400,000 years ago, something happened that supercharged this whole process. We tamed fire, and it changes everything. An anthropologist named Polly Wiesner spent years studying the Juhoansi Bushmen in the Kalahari Desert, analyzing exactly what they talked about at different times of the day. And the data was completely black and white. During the day, their language was almost entirely practical. It was economic. Who is getting the water? Where are the tubers? Why is this tool broken? Complaints, instructions, arguments. But at night, everything changed. When the sun went down and the fire was lit, the practical talk vanished. 81% of all conversations around the campfire were stories. Think about the psychological impact of the campfire. Before fire, when the sun set, the world became a terrifying, deadly place for a primate. You huddled in silence. But fire pushed the darkness back. It gave us extra hours of the day that could not be spent working, because you couldn't see well enough to hunt or gather. All you could do was stare at the flames and listen. The fire was our first movie theater. It focused the shared attention of the entire tribe onto one person's face. The flickering light illuminated their expressions, and in that warm, safe circle, the gossip about who stole the berries slowly transformed into something else. It transformed into myths. It transformed into the story of the great hunter, or the spirit of the animal, or the origins of the sky. Fire gave us the time to dream out loud, and we were getting closer to the answer to our question. But the deeper we dig into the bones of our past, the stranger the reflection becomes. Because we always assume we are the only ones who crossed this line, the only ones who lit the fire and told the story. But what if we weren't? In 1989, deep inside the Kibara cave in Israel, archaeologists were brushing away the dirt from a skeleton that was about 60,000 years old. It was not a Homo sapiens, it was a Neanderthal. For a long time, the popular image of a Neanderthal was a brutish, hunched caveman who could only grunt. But as they excavated the throat area of this skeleton, they found something that made the scientific world stop dead in its tracks. They found a hyoid bone. The hyoid is a tiny, horseshoe-shaped bone in the neck that anchors the tongue muscles. It is the crucial piece of architecture that makes human speech possible. And the Neanderthal hyoid was practically identical to yours. And the plot thickens. Fast forward to the early 2000s, when geneticists, led by Svante Pääbo, who later won the Nobel Prize, began to map ancient DNA. They were looking for a very specific gene called FOXP2. In 1990, researchers discovered a family in London known in medical literature as the KE family. Half the members of this family had a severe speech and language disorder. They had normal intelligence, but they could not articulate words properly, and they struggled with basic grammar. Scientists tracked this down to a mutation in a single gene, FOXP2. It became known as the language gene. So Pääbo's team looked at the Neanderthal DNA to see if they had the ape version of this gene or the human version. They had ours. The exact same mutation that allows us to speak. Let that land. Somewhere in the Ice Age forests of Europe, tens of thousands of years ago, another species of human had the throat, they had the brain wiring, they had the genetics. We don't know what they sounded like. Maybe their voices were higher pitched, maybe more nasal because of their massive chest cavities. The honest answer is, the air vibrations they made faded into the cold wind, and we will never hear them. But they almost certainly spoke. They sat around their own fires. They grieved their dead. They painted in caves. We were not the only ones talking in the dark. And yet, they are gone, and we are here. And right about now, you might be feeling a sense of awe at all this. The clever hands, the gossip, the firelight stories, the shared genetics. It paints a beautiful, romantic picture of humanity slowly rising from the dirt, hand in hand, lifting our voices to the heavens. But here is the part we do not like to talk about. Here is the thing nobody puts on the cute infographic about the dawn of language. And now I have to tell you the other side of this. Because if we are honest, the spark that ignited the human voice was not love. It was not curiosity. It was not the desire to tell a beautiful story. The tone of the story changes entirely when you realize what our ancestors actually were in the food chain. We look at ourselves now, sitting at the top of the world, building cities and flying aeroplanes, and we project that dominance backward. But for millions of years, the apes that walked upright on the African savanna were not the apex predators. We were slow. We had no sharp claws. We had no fangs. We were soft, weak bags of meat, carrying fat, helpless babies. We were prey, and the world we lived in was an absolute nightmare. Imagine the savannah at dusk. You are not armed with a rifle. You have short, staccato cough. Instantly, without even looking up, every monkey in the troop would dive into the bushes and hide. If a monkey spotted a leopard in the grass, it made a loud, barking call. Instantly, every monkey would run up to the highest branches of the trees where the heavy leopard couldn't follow. And if a monkey spotted a python, it made a chuttering noise. Instantly, the troop would stand up on their hind legs and scan the ground. They didn't just have a sound for fear, they had a word for eagle, a word for leopard, a word for snake. Now, picture our early ancestors. The pressure on them was 100 times worse. They were spending more and more time on the ground, out in the open, highly vulnerable. The first true words, the first leaps from mere emotion to specific meaning, were almost certainly born of absolute, heart-stopping terror. The first time a human ancestor deliberately altered a sound to mean a specific thing, it was a panic reflex. It was a desperate scream to warn their child. It was, "Death is coming from above." It was, "Death is coming from the grass." Language was forged in the crucible of being hunted. And the psychological price of that is something we still carry today. Because once you can name the predator, once you can talk about the leopard, you can talk about the leopard even when it is not there. You can imagine the leopard. You can anticipate the leopard. The moment we acquired language, we lost the peace of the present moment. An animal without language feels fear only when the predator is right in front of it. But a creature with words can simulate the future. It can terrify itself with things that have not happened yet. The evolutionary price we paid for the ability to speak was chronic, existential anxiety. We learned to fear the dark, not just because of what was actually in it, but because of what we could now tell each other was in it. The ghost, the spirit, the monster. The very mechanism that allowed us to survive the monsters of the savannah became the machine that generates the monsters in our own heads. We learned to speak because the silence was killing us. We were so terrified, so weak, so desperate to survive that we broke the barrier of our own biology just to scream to each other in the dark. And sit with that for a moment. Feel the weight of that. Your voice is a trauma response. The beautiful, complex language you use every day is the echo of a terrified ape surrounded by predators begging its family not to die. And this is where it stops being just heavy. Because if you look closely, this is also where it becomes something incredibly beautiful. Yes, the origins were dark. Yes, the first word was a warning born of fear. But don't cancel that darkness. Look at what we built out of it. Because we were so afraid, because the world was so much bigger and more dangerous than us, we had no choice but to rely entirely on each other. That terrified cry about the leopard was, at its very core, an act of supreme care. The ape screaming the warning was drawing the predator's attention to itself, risking its own life just so the others could run. Language was born as an act of sacrifice, and as the thousands of years ticked by, we took that biological alarm system and we stretched it. We repurposed the machinery of terror. The exact same throat, the exact same dropped larynx, the exact same breath that was used to scream, "Run!" slowly began to do other things. We used it to ask questions. We used it to name the stars. We used it to explain to a child how to shape a piece of flint. The warning became a story about the predator. The story about the predator became a myth about the spirits of the savannah. The myth became a religion. The religion became philosophy and literature and science. We took the jagged, bloody tool of our own survival and we polished it until it became a mirror reflecting the entire universe. We don't know what awaits us as a species. Maybe we are a brief, noisy flash in the long history of a quiet planet. Science can describe the anatomy of the throat. It can track the migration of the FOXP2 gene. It can analyze the social mechanics of Dunbar's number. But science cannot crawl inside the experience itself. Science cannot fully explain the sheer, breathtaking miracle of what happens when one human mind reaches out and touches another through the empty air. We are the apes that learned to share our minds. We took the profound loneliness of individual consciousness, the absolute isolation of being trapped inside your own skull, and we broke it. So let's go back to where we started. Right now, you are sitting in that coffee shop, or in your room, or on that train. The people around you are making those bizarre noises, pushing air out of their lungs, vibrating their meat flaps, shaping the waves with their tongues. It is the exact same world, but look at them now. Look at what they are actually doing. Every casual greeting, every argument over a spilled drink, every laugh, every text message they read aloud, it is all built on a 3 million year unbroken chain of desperate survival. They are using the anatomy of a choking hazard, the cognitive magic of a pointed finger, the social glue of primate grooming, and the genetic legacy of vanished species, all bundled together. The air is vibrating with the telepathy of survivors. If you've got a dog or a cat or even just another person sitting nearby, go look them in the eye right now. Try to imagine the silence they live in. And tell me in the comments, do you think someone is looking back at you in there, wishing they could bridge the gap? I read these. If you loved this journey down the rabbit hole and you want to keep looking at the ordinary world through slightly different eyes, join us, subscribe, speak up. The silence isn't so scary once you break it.